This is David Dubal, and I am privileged to be talking to a pianist who, wherever he goes, excites audiences. My guest is the famous Australian-born virtuoso pianist who lives in London. His name, Leslie Howard, and he's been known to New York audiences, especially in the last several years, by his most interesting programs that he has done recently. Leslie Howard, thank you for coming to WNCN.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.
One of your great loves, and that is the music of Franz Liszt.
Well, he was a composer that, I suppose, like anybody who starts to flex his muscles playing the piano and discovers that he can play octaves and leap around without missing, it means you know that you can play the Hungarian Rhapsodies. And I had no idea when I started to play Liszt exactly what scope of man I was dealing with. I didn't know the symphonies. I had no idea about the oratorios. If anybody had told me that there were over 1,300 distinct pieces by the man, I would have just boggled at the thought. And eventually I came to know him and love him and take him very seriously, which I must say a good many of one's musical colleagues don't.
Thank goodness it's happening, though, that more and more of us are not only taking him seriously, but understanding his greatness in a way that I think must happen.
Well, it should do. There can be very few composers who, after this amount of time lapsed from their death, are still hot and controversial like Liszt is. And people still mistrust him, I think, for exactly the same reasons that they mistrusted him during his life, either on extra musical grounds relating to his morals, or,
Yes.
or they're rude about his music because they can't play the jolly stuff.
Or a lot of English writers, I may say, that just thought there was just too much tinsel. And of course, in Victorian England, this man was. He had a career everywhere of the highest magnitude,
Yes.
but he couldn't really make it in England the way he should have.
No, he played successfely there in 1840 and 1841.
But then Victoria, got too powerful. I think.
What pianos he played on, and he didn't go back to England for more than 45 years. And it was just before he died he went there. And actually, they were quite nice to him at the end, and they performed St. Elizabeth for him, and he played for Queen Victoria, who mellowed somewhat.
He was a safe old man.
Well,
then,
yes, I think all the papers caricatured him as some kind of a saint by then, which I expect he probably was.
Yeah.
But England gave him a very hard time, right down to that hideous biography that Ernest Newman wrote.
I condemn him to this day for such a biography.
Well, he couldn't cope because Liszt was such an important figure in the life of Wagner. Newman, besotted as he was by Wagner, no matter how evil Wagner had been as a human being, just couldn't cope with how large a figure Liszt was as a musical influence on Wagner. So this book is really a character assassination of the very worst kind.
Incredible. For his Wagner biography, the 4 volumes are landmarks in the history of biography.
That's right.
And then, as a side issue, he creates this murderous volume, it had a big influence, unfortunately.
It's a terrible, terrible book.
Mm-hmm.
But people read. You see that his principal sources are novels.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, that again goes to prove what you really said. He is hot and controversial still, and he still has a posthumous envy. People are jealous of this kind of man who seemed to have had everything. We are now ready to hear Leslie Howard in performance of the 1883. Is it 1883?
Yes, it's
yes,
1883.
It is. Valse oubliée number 3. Leslie Howard, the artist. Valse oubliée, ending mysteriously, forgotten, as this indeed was this piece. The pianist in this beautiful performance, Leslie Howard, on his new Hyperion recording, which will be out in the United States very soon. It happens to be, as we were discussing while we were listening to the music. Yes, sometimes we don't always concentrate on the music when it's on. We were saying that this is one of the longest, if not the longest, LP ever made at 74 minutes. So to get Liszt's waltzes on, he had to really jam it in, and it is going to be absolutely a collector's item, I believe. I think you're very happy with this album, Leslie.
I haven't actually listened to it right through, I have to be honest.
And I'm making you listen to it right now. Well, we're going right over now to the rare piano encores on the same label, and that is at Tower Records, and you can get it all over the city. People are even selling it on the street corners. You know, it's become one of the hottest records in the United States. I don't know if you know that coming from London.
Well, I've heard tell that it's selling here, and I think you can get the CD of it here as well, can't you?
Oh, that's wonderful.
Somebody
yes.
told me that.
The CD is at Tower as well. Well, you have Bruckner pieces on it. You have Grieg pieces. You have Wagner pieces. You have Bach Granger. You have Reger, Gershwin, Rossini, and that's why it's the hottest album in the world.
Well, it was just a joy to put this record together, because there are all sorts of little pieces. We play recitals now where we don't play any little pieces unless we play 40 of them in a row, and then everybody falls asleep by about number 13 because they've lost count. In the good old days, somebody like Rachmaninoff towards the end of a program would put in 6 pieces by 6 different composers, one after the other.
Sure.
And we don't dare do it.
And you know, and the word dare is so strange here, because nobody does it anymore. It's not, and so we don't dare because nobody does it. The fact is that audiences are missing the little pieces of the literature.
Sure, but you see, some of the things on this record I actually played in a recital in London just to prove that one could do this sort of thing. And the critical fraternity gave me a very mixed reception, and somebody said, of course, the second half of the program was just encore pieces.
Yeah.
And that was the end of the review.
Well, this is a very bad thing. You should tongue lash each of those critics, and they're becoming dangerous in many ways, because the literature of the instrument and the literature period of all instruments have become so stylized to, you know, sonatas, Chreisleriana. This is a pity, because the piano has produced, one of the glories is that it's a miniature. How many conductors would go out of their minds to have the incredible amount of miniatures that are just not even played by the pianists? There are no miniatures written for orchestras practically.
That's right, and I think, well, you know, if you discover a piano piece by Bruckner and it turns out to be very nice, you can't put it in a program that's where it's sandwiched between a Beethoven and a Chopin sonata. You have to think of some way of getting it on, and there are all sorts of little things which little transcriptions. A little piece by Wagner. Wagner wrote buckets of piano music, most of it of such a desperately awful quality that it can't be played even by the most addicted Wagnerites. But there are 1 or 2 little album leaves that are very beautiful, but they're also difficult to program. And things like the study that Busoni wrote on the Serenade from Don Giovanni,
yes,
or some of Rossini's little piano pieces.
Well, that's why recordings, of course, are so valuable. In that way, at least, so many of these things are saved. This is a beautiful one, rare piano encores, and if you can't find it on your street corner, you can find it as A66090 Hyperion, and it is a wonderful label that comes out of England and seems to have pretty good distribution.
It's not bad, and I think their best qualities are that the actual product is beautifully produced. They've all got the loveliest covers, and the recording quality is fine, but I think they had a lot of teething trouble when they kicked off about getting records sold outside Britain, but I think that's all clear now. I think it's Harmonia Mundi that distributes
that's right,
them
they
here.
do, and Hyperion truly deserves the plug we're giving it. And now we hear one of those transcriptions, Grieg's own transcription, I think, of his famous song, I Love You. And it's, well, there's no doubt about it. It has something, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah. Let's hear my guest, Leslie Howard, in Grieg's own transcription of his celebrated song that he accompanied his wife everywhere. You know, he was a good pianist, nothing like you, but a good pianist. I Love You, by Edvard Grieg. Ah, what a beautiful transcription by Grieg himself of his own famous song, I Love You, in the hands of Leslie Howard on his rare Piano Encores disc. Well, I'll be right back after this message, and we're going to hear a lot more music. We've only begun. We have the 4th Mephisto Waltz coming up. Wait for me. This is David Dubal, Leslie Howard, pianist born in Australia, tours the world constantly, has great fun, lives in libraries and concert halls. He goes and he finds music that nobody plays, and the fact is that that's what the LP needs desperately. Music that is not the same. One more appassionata, Leslie, I will go crazy. Now, I don't mind it if someone has something new to say, but I have found that often nobody has anything new to say with it.
It's like grey wallpaper, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
There's so many records like that. It's a pity there's so many programs like that too.
Yes, one day in your life you must have decided that you refused to play the conventional game where everything was so stylized into the boredom.
Yes, and that doesn't mean I don't ever play these pieces, but I think you've got to balance a program well. I mean, if you're going to play the hammer clavier sonata for the first half, for God's sake, don't play the Dear Belly variations in the second half.
Please don't.
Though it's been done, and by very famous pianists that I can think of. But, you know...
there is an audience out there to think of.
Well, right, and I think the number of programs that are designed to give people indigestion is frightening. And also, conversely, people play short programs now, and there's not enough variety, and there's not enough room for it. There ought to be, I mean, nobody plays these old Bach transcriptions which used to start programs, and some of that's very beautiful music apart from being beautiful piano writing.
Well, I said to you while we were listening to the I Love You, and you said, well, when have you heard Grieg on a program recently? You know, and you don't. The man wrote 66 fantastic little lyrical pieces. He wrote, you know, even the concerto is not played, but that's another thing. The point is how are we going to make people interested in serious, great music if it's becoming limited to 50 pieces?
Well, I'm afraid that we have to blame competitions for a lot of it, because, as I'm sure you know, kids tour the world now with their 10 pieces that they're going to play in every competition that comes up.
That many?
For the next, yes, that's right. You know, it might be Christmas 3 years away that they eventually take a prize in one, and then if they're offered 2 recital programs, they haven't got the repertoire. But it's a great shame, because everybody then goes around with 1 prelude and fugue and the requisite Chopin studies and a Liszt study and 1 Beethoven sonata, and they never know the other 31.
Yeah. They don't even know them to hear them. In other words, if you played a recording of Opus 31 number 1, most of the young pianists in the world wouldn't know that was the G major sonata of Beethoven. And
sadly, if you actually take them beyond the bounds of piano music and inquire of them how many string quartets or operas they've heard lately, it's a very distressing response that you generally get.
It's incredible, isn't it?
And it seems to me that the
why
more you know, the better effect it has. Even if what I was going to play tomorrow was the Little Mozart Sonata in C, which everybody learns when they're 6, I think I play it better for knowing Figaro and Don Giovanni, and that's all there is to it.
Of course, it seeps into you. It's the only way to understand the idiom is to understand the whole composer.
Sure.
A Schumann symphony is also important to hear if you're going to understand his style.
Yes.
Okay, now enough of the anger on my part, and we will now move to a work that you have definitely some great responsibility with. It's the 4th Mephisto Waltz. Tell us about this.
Well, Liszt wrote 2 pieces called the 4th Mephisto Waltz, and neither of them was published in his lifetime. One of them has a subtitle which is called Bagatelle Without Tonality, and so that's always called that now in order to distinguish it from the other. The piece, which is always called 4th Mephisto Waltz, is complete. You can play it from beginning to end of the manuscript, but just before the end there's a bar crossed out and there's a note in Liszt's handwriting that says, add about 60 bars andantino, and then consecutively on the same book of manuscript sheets at the back are 3 sketches for this bit that he wanted to put in the middle. So we know, there's no question that these sketches belong to anything else. And a few people have had a bash at putting it together, and I think most people fell foul of the 3rd page, which has just got a bunch of quavers or 8th notes, as I believe you call them here.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard it done as if it were some fearful cadenza which he was about to fling in, but what I'm sure it is an essay for an accompaniment to the tune that he'd written on the 2nd page of sketches. Anyway, I was commissioned to complete this piece for a cycle of music by Liszt and Bartók at La Scala in Milan in 1978, and so I worked long and hard on it, and what I genuinely hope is that absolutely nobody listening will be able to tell that anybody other than Liszt had a hand in it. Otherwise, I've failed.
Wonderful. Well, let's see if you failed or not. And it's part of your new Liszt album, which presents all of the Liszt waltzes. Leslie Howard now will be heard in the Fourth Mephisto Waltz, 1885. Fourth Mephisto Waltz in the hands of Leslie Howard. And what a work it is. And Leslie, you did it. There's no possible way that I would have known that it was not a complete piece.
Well, thank you.
Quite wonderful. What a violent work in some ways. And Liszt was, he had a sardonic violence, which is so 20th century in a way. He almost looked into the century's heart.
It is, but it's amazing to see this in the hands of somebody who was sort of in a state of semi-retirement as a music master, and as, well, 3/4 of the way to being a priest. And this demonic spirit, I mean, this is less than a year before he died. There's no question of it ever dying out in him. And that he could produce these pieces alongside the late religious works or even the Valse oubliée,
yes,
shows just the breadth of the man.
Yes, extraordinary, well put. My guest is Leslie Howard, and we are now going to the encore recording, and we're going to hear a piece by Reger, correct?
Oh, yes, well...
Tell me about Maria's Cradle Song.
Well, Max Reger, if he'd lived to be 70, would probably have been as prolific as Liszt. And, well, he's interesting. He's interesting because he's responsible for the best remark ever made to a music critic.
Mm-hmm.
And he's interesting because his music is so well put together, and as soon as you get by the prejudice of those who say, but there are so many notes, or it's all fugues or something, he's a splendid composer.
Oh, yes.
This is one for the people who like something that's actually quite playable for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And it's his own transcription of one of his songs. For his Opus 76, he produced a volume with no fewer than 60 songs in it. And I mean, he just couldn't stop himself.
Yeah.
And he produced these 60 songs, and this is based on a folk song. And I suppose some of the people who know the two little Brahms songs, Opus 91, with the viola in it, will recognize the tune from there. Other people might actually know the folk song from having a German or Austrian background. Whatever, it's a song sung by Mary at the cradle of Jesus. Anyway, that's what the folk song's about.
Then let's hear Maria's Lullaby. Max Reger, who died at 43. He would have been probably more prolific than Telemann. Leslie Howard is the pianist. What a gem from the rare Piano Encores album on Hyperion. Leslie Howard, the artist, in Maria's Lullaby, Opus 76, number 52. Sounds almost like Czerny there.
Doesn't it?
That is a beauty by Max Reger, who has never been really exportable outside of Germany for some reason.
It's been hard. The organists know him, bless them, because they haven't got much else to toy with. But the pianists should know him. He wrote a wonderful piano concerto and a couple of excellent sets of variations, but a lot of miniatures that the people of ordinary talent could play.
And everyone thinks, oh yes, he's so pretentious, he's so pompous, he's so notey.
Well, who could write anything as simple as that little piece?
Yeah. All right, now, Leslie, we go to a piece that is really, again, unknown from your new waltz album of the complete Liszt waltzes, and it's, what is it? Valse de Bravoure, huh?
Yes, Valse de Bravoure. Liszt, well, it's a piece with a fairly long germination. He wrote a little waltz called the Ball at Bern in Switzerland. He then wrote another little thing called Galop de Bal, which was a polka based on the same tune. And then eventually he got it into a number called the Grande Valse de Bravoure. And then about 20 years later he took the Grande off, but he left it in the music, I'm glad to say, and called it Valse de Bravoure and published it as one of his 3 valse caprices.
We're going to hear it right now in the hands of Leslie Howard, who made the recording. From Leslie Howard's new recording of the complete waltzes, we heard the Valse de Bravoure of Liszt from around 1850. It is sensational. We're going to now hear, if you don't mind, the Romance in E flat. Not by Anton Rubinstein, but by Rachmaninoff. Nobody knows this piece.
Well, when it first came out into print, the cover said that it had been arranged by Rachmaninoff's cousin Silotti, but the second and third edition didn't. And I suspect that Rachmaninoff had more than a hand in it, and I suspect that if Sulotti started the transcription, Rachmaninoff certainly finished it. What it is one of the songs from Rachmaninoff's Opus 8, the text of which is Thou Art Like a Flower, the poem by Heine. And, well, everybody knows his arrangements of his songs, Lilacs and Daisies. And, well, this is another flower piece.
You've brought us so much. Let us hear the romance of Rachmaninoff in the hands of Leslie Howard. Sheer loveliness, the romance of Rachmaninoff, one of his songs transcribed by Rachmaninoff. Leslie Howard, my guest, was the pianist, and we will be right back after this message or two. This is David Dubal, and my guest is Leslie Howard. And Leslie Howard, well, tell us a little bit about your birth in Australia, your studies, and your climb, as they say, to the gates of fame.
Well, as you say, I was born in Australia, which isn't
the home of Granger.
Yes,
Percy
that's
Granger.
true. But like Granger, eventually one has to make one's career in a wider world. And although I was fairly slow about doing it because I was interested in a lot of things academic, I'm happy actually to say that I never went to a music conservatorium. I took private piano lessons with a lady who now lives in New York, in fact, who had been a pupil of Corto, a lady called June McLean. And then eventually, after I did a degree mostly in languages and literature, I packed my traps and set forth to Italy and studied there with Guido Agosti, and then came to London and fell in love with the place and have stayed there ever since and acquired British citizenship en route. And it's really in Britain that I started to make records and started to play.
So you're at that rare breed that did not go to the competition route, did not even go to the conservatory. You studied liberal arts in a sense, and that's interesting in this day and age.
Well, it worried me that everybody played the same stuff, especially the way they played it, and I loved all the old players much better than most of the new ones. And I was just too fascinated. As soon as I got hooked on anything, I had to follow it to the end, and so this is how I got to learn the complete works of Percy Granger.
Well, that leads me right into perfection itself. Blythe Bells, Percy Granger, your countryman. Indeed, you have a recording of Percy Granger as well.
Yes.
Tell us about this.
This one's mad. Granger once said when he gave a lecture at New York University that the three greatest composers were Bach, Delius, and Duke Ellington. And when they all picked themselves up off the floor, some of them actually listened to what he said and took him seriously. And this piece is sort of enshrines somehow all of these qualities. It's not really a transcription so much as all the bits he could remember and then a few bits more from the piece that we all know under the title of Sheep May Safely Graze from Bach's Cantata number 208. But it's as if Delius and Duke Ellington somehow stalked through it from time to time.
Granger was some incredible creature, wasn't he?
Yes.
Let's hear you, Leslie Howard, in Blythe Bells by Percy Granger, based on Bach. Damn those purists who may get mad at Percy Granger for doing that. I tell you, thank you for recording that.
Oh, thank you.
Quite a fantastic piece of wit, humor, and beauty, and Granger sure did know how to create a mood always.
That's right. Actually, it comes over as a very sincere piece of homage to Bach in its way, doesn't it?
And I think it was.
Yeah.
And now to end on a capricious note, Petite Caprice by the man who called himself a fourth-rate pianist, Rossini. And what a little piece this is. Tell us about it as we conclude.
Well, it's a little caprice in the style of Offenbach. And I suppose a lot of people will know it because it was orchestrated, or bits of it were orchestrated by Respighi for a ballet. But as a piano piece, if Rossini could play this, he was no fourth-rate pianist. It's one of those things which is jolly hard, and it has these glissandi in the right hand where you don't have to just to slide with your thumb. You have to slide with the flesh of your little finger as well and do them in octaves, and you have to do them many times. And indeed, I must say, the first time when I went to record this piece, I injured my finger recording it, and we had to cancel the recording session.
Oh, interesting. Sins from my old age.
That's what it was.
He subtitled all of these, quite a few pieces, about 100 and some.
At least 100, yes.
Extraordinary. And that was after he gave up his operatic career. He became this wonderful little piano piece composer.
He took to writing little pieces and eating large meals.
Yes, he got larger and larger, and the pieces got smaller and smaller. We now hear the Petite Caprice in the hands of Leslie Howard. On that exciting note, we conclude our program. That was the Petite Caprice, style of Offenbach by Rossini, the artist, Leslie Howard, who I've been delighted to talk with. He has been called the Klemperer of the piano. He is certainly one of the most wonderful programmers of recitals. He creates excitement, and that is what we need in the concert hall. And it was just great talking to you. He has been, of course, everywhere in Paris and London, and he has played with the great orchestras of the world, and he's from Australia. He has played in La Scala. He has completed Liszt works. He is doing all of the original piano music, and may I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you very much.
This is David Dubal. Thank you for listening.